we're going to be visiting the Intrepid. The Intrepid is an air and space museum that's on an old World War II aircraft carrier. Here's the entrance to the Intrepid Air and Space Museum, right next to the floating World War II aircraft carrier. And this is how you get in. So we're going to be heading into the flight control tower on the Intrepid as part of the Air Museum here. The staircases here inside the Intrepid are kind of a tight fit, but it's cool going up inside the aircraft carrier. Here's one of the officers' cabins. And this is the captain's cabin. Here's the navigation bridge and the chart house. And this is where they figured out their location and where they were going. Charted their position. Here's the pilot house on the bridge. This is where they would steer the ship and send information down to the engine room to speed up or slow down. And here's more of the bridge control stations where you could overlook the flight deck and the direction of travel of the ship. So here's a lookout from the bridge, and it offers a nice view of the city. So here from outdoor on the bridge you get a good view of the flight deck, which they're using to display all of these old aircrafts. Here you can see examples of the artillery and gun batteries that were used in World War II to protect the Intrepid. This is Combat Information Center. This is where they would communicate with pilots. Here's the old workshop from the Intrepid. They have tools, grinders, sanders, blades. Here's the main anchor room. This is where they would release the anchors for the boat to stop. Here's the kitchen, or mess as they call it on boats. And this is where they would prepare the food. So here's some of the sleeping quarters for the crew that were on board the Intrepid during World War II. Here's where they slept. And then here's an example of some of their storage lockers that were used. The pilot's briefing room used to be up on a higher deck, but then after a kamikaze attack took out some people in the pilot briefing room, they decided to put the pilot briefing room farther down deck. And because it was a long way up to the flight deck, the Navy put in an escalator to get the pilots from their briefing room up to their flight deck. We're on the top deck of the Intrepid, and they got a bunch of airplanes here for us to look at. So we're going to be walking around and taking a look at the different planes. There's the control tower for the aircraft carrier back in World War II. That's where they would be commanding the ship and the planes taking off and landing as well. On display here is an Israel aircraft. This was actually a French-built aircraft that Israel modified for their needs, and this was used in the 1960s and 1970s. Here's an F-16 that's been in use since the 1960s and 1970s. It saw combat during the Vietnam War and even during the Gulf War. This is the A-12, which led to the development to the SR-71 Blackbird. The A-12 and the SR-71 were used for espionage until spy satellites became the norm. So there's an F-14, made most famous for use in the 1980s Top Gun movie. And this is the A-6 Intruder, which was used for fighting in all weather conditions. So here's an F-11. This is the plane, obviously, that the Blue Angels flew during air shows, doing aerial acrobatics. This plane is so fast that at one point it actually caught up to its own cannon fire, and a pilot shot himself down with his own cannon fire. Here's an F-9 F-8 Cougar. This plane was originally used in a park in New Jersey for kids to play on, and then it was donated to the Intrepid as part of their air museum. This is the E-1B Tracer, which was used as anti-submarine warfare and also for aircraft communications in flight. So here's the McDonnell Demon, which was first used in the 1950s. Here's the Dauntless 2. So this is the Italian MB339, which was used by Italian pilots in air shows all across Europe. This is the F4 Skyray, which they thought looked kind of like a manta ray, and that's how it got its name, the Skyray. Here's a Harrier, which was most famous for its vertical takeoff and landing abilities. This is the T-34 Mentor, which was used as a training airplane by the Navy. Here's the Phantom II, which was used by the Marines and other branches of the military. The Crusader was the first supersonic jet launched from an aircraft carrier and the fastest plane to ever be launched by the Intrepid, which is the aircraft carrier that we're on. So this is the Talon, which was famous for escorting the space shuttle when they had to mount the space shuttle on an aircraft and fly it from airbase to airbase on the back of an airplane. Here is a MiG-17 that was used during the Korean War. Here's a MiG. This is the MiG-21 that was used during the Vietnam War. So this is a Coast Guard helicopter that was used for sea rescues. It has the unique ability to actually land in water with its floats on the sides and its hull design, which allowed it to float and land and take off from water positions. The Chickasaw was used by Marines during the Korean War for assault missions, and it was also later on developed for civilian use. On board the Intrepid, they have the Space Shuttle parked here in this housed area, the Space Shuttle Pavilion. Here is the picture of them dropping off the Space Shuttle here in New York City. Here's the Space Shuttle Enterprise, and every time I see the Space Shuttle up close, it gives me chills. This is pretty cool to see. They have this platform so you can get up and see it kind of like up close. So we're in the airplane hangar deck on the Intrepid. This is where they would keep the airplanes below deck and bring them up by elevator to launch them. This right here was the landing system. The lights help the pilots land the airplane. And then there's some more aircraft to look at on this level as well. Here's an Avenger aircraft, famous for being flown by George W. Bush, who flew the plane damaged and took out a radio tower, finished his mission, and then parachuted out to safety. Here's the FJ-3 Fury, which in the 1960s was used to remotely control drone aircraft. I was surprised to learn that they were using drone aircraft all the way in the 1960s. This is an A4 Skyhawk. The planes like this were launched from the Intrepid during the Vietnam War. This is the Retriever. It's a helicopter with twin blades, and it was used to pick up and retrieve people and items. Here's a replica of a Mercury space capsule. These splashed down in the ocean in the 1960s, and the Intrepid went and picked several of them up. Here's a Lego scale model of the Intrepid. Pretty impressive, all the Lego bricks that they had to use to build this. This area of the Intrepid is called the Exploreum, and this is where kids can get hands-on with various items like a flight deck. They have a cockpit, and they got various items that the kids can interact with.
Oh no, you're too low, you're too high. Low, now you're too high, you're too high.
Tammy's helping land airplanes.
Tail up, not down.
This is an area of the boat that they call the fantail, and this is looking out from the back of the Intrepid, and you get a really nice view overlooking the water here. As part of the admission in the Air and Space Museum on the Intrepid here in New York City, they also include a tour of a World War II submarine. And right near the center of the submarine is a cool looking Navy missile right there. And here's the British Airways Concorde. This is the last thing we're going to see here at the Sea and Space Museum, the Intrepid Museum. And this was a commercial jet that would fly the speed of sound and take passengers from Europe to America and back.